There was a government agency. Of course there was. Every human folly eventually gets its own office, its own acronym, its own underpaid bureaucrats shuffling papers of existential dread. This particular agency was called the Infinity Bureau, a department dedicated to the classification, regulation, and, if possible, termination of infinite things. It had been founded after an unfortunate philosophical accident involving a mathematician, a bottle of scotch, and an improperly locked filing cabinet that contained all known paradoxes. The Bureau's mission was simple in theory and impossible in practice. Manage infinity. Put it in a spreadsheet. Give it an expiration date. Enforce constraints upon the unconstrainable. They had, predictably, been failing since their inception. The office itself was a drab affair, fluorescent lit, with a coffee machine that brewed something conceptually similar to coffee but more precisely describable as liquid apology. The staff, worn down by years of trying to make sense of the senseless, had long since given up on optimism. Instead, they settled into a kind of resigned intellectual cynicism, the sort of mindset that allows you to file a report titled The Unsolvability of Infinite Loops in Parking Lot Design with a straight face. And then, one day, the Bureau received a complaint. It arrived as a formal letter, which was in itself suspicious. Nobody used formal letters anymore. The letter was written in an impeccable hand, the kind that suggested either a time traveler or a deeply repressed perfectionist. It read,
"To whom it may concern at the Infinity Bureau, I wish to register a complaint about the nature of infinity itself. It has been encroaching on my property, and I find it both distressing and profoundly inconvenient. I demand immediate remediation. Sincerely, Bernard Q. Atkinson."
The letter was passed down through several desks, most of which had long given up on reading the nonsense that crossed them. It finally landed on the desk of Sylvia Trent, the department's most senior, and most jaded, analyst. Sylvia read the letter twice, sighed, and pinched the bridge of her nose.
Infinity is encroaching on his property. What does he think we do here? Build fences around eternity?
Nevertheless, protocol dictated she investigate, and so, with the weariness of a woman who had once spent 3 fiscal years writing a report titled Zeno's Paradoxes and Their Impact on Traffic Congestion, she grabbed her coat and left the office. Bernard Q. Atkinson lived at 1 End Street, a name Sylvia noted with a kind of dark amusement, fitting, given the nature of the complaint. The house itself was perfectly ordinary, modest, brick, with the kind of aggressively trimmed lawn that suggested a man at war with entropy. Bernard himself was waiting at the door. He was a tall, thin man with the precise mannerisms of someone who measured things for fun. He ushered Sylvia inside with the urgency of a man who had seen something that should not be seen.
"The problem is in the study."
He led her through an immaculate hallway. The study was well kept, lined with bookshelves filled with philosophy, mathematics, and an entire shelf labeled Unspeakable Cosmic Horror reference materials. But none of that was the problem. The problem was the door in the corner. It was a perfectly normal door. The issue was that it was not there yesterday. Sylvia frowned.
And where does it lead?
Bernard rubbed his temples.
"That is the problem. It does not lead anywhere. Or rather, it leads to everywhere."
He opened the door, and beyond it was more study. Not another room, not a different space, just more study, repeating into the distance. The bookshelves continued endlessly, as though reality had become an overworked intern who had accidentally hit Ctrl-V one too many times. Sylvia took a deep breath.
How long has it been like this?
"Since 2:17 a.m., I went to get a glass of water and returned to find my house suddenly hosting a non-Euclidean architectural experiment."
Sylvia peered inside. The bookshelves stretched forever. She picked up a book from one of them. It was a copy of Gödel, Escher, Bach. The next one was Gödel, Escher, Bach again. So was the next, and the next. She swore under her breath. Bernard asked, raising an eyebrow.
"Repeating books?"
Repeating infinities. This isn't just an infinite space, it's an infinite recursion of the same space. Your study isn't just endless, it's looping. The universe has decided it really likes this room, and has committed to it permanently.
Bernard was silent for a moment. Then,
"That seems excessive."
Oh, you have no idea.
Back at the bureau, Sylvia convened an emergency meeting.
We have an active infinity breach at 1 End Street.
she announced to the room of exhausted mathematicians, philosophers, and one guy who had once tried to punch a fractal out of frustration.
What kind of infinity?
Asked Douglas, their resident set theorist, who had long since abandoned all hope of a normal life.
Self-replicating, room-based, locally contained but infinitely expanding. With bonus recursion.
Douglas swore.
It's a Type 4C recursive unbounded infinity.
Yeah, bad one.
The entire room groaned. Type 4Cs were notoriously difficult. If you tried to exit one, you just entered it again. If you burned it down, you merely made an infinite amount of burning room. One unfortunate intern had once tried to map a Type 4C onto a Cartesian plane and had disappeared into his own graph paper.
We'll need the metaphysical containment team to deal with this,
said Douglas.
We'll also need someone to apologize to Bernard,
Sylvia added. The metaphysical containment team arrived, armed with an array of conceptual stabilizers, devices designed to collapse infinite spaces into manageable ones. These included the boundary setter, which enforced Euclidean geometry like a particularly strict substitute teacher. The event horizon lock, which convinced reality that certain things were simply not allowed. A firm talking to, which worked surprisingly well on misbehaving infinities. As the team set up, Bernard watched with the tired resignation of a man whose mortgage did not cover this. Finally, Sylvia approached him.
Mr. Atkinson, do you recall doing anything last night that might have caused reality to, how do I put this, give up?
Bernard thought for a moment.
I was reading about Hilbert's Hotel.
Sylvia groaned.
Of course you were.
Hilbert's Hotel was the thought experiment about an infinite hotel, where even if every room was full, you could still accommodate more guests by shifting everyone over. A paradox that proved infinity's absurdity.
I think,
Bernard admitted,
I might have thought about it too hard.
Their slice of reality, as it turned out, was highly suggestible. The containment team activated their stabilizers. The room flickered, wavered, and then, the infinite study was gone. Just a single, normal study. Bernard exhaled.
Well, that was horrifying.
Welcome to Tuesday,
Sylvia replied. Back at the bureau, Sylvia filed her report.
Incident type, Type 4C recursive infinity breach. Cause, overenthusiastic belief in Hilbert's Hotel. Resolution, deployment of metaphysical stabilizers. Reality recalibrated. Recommendation, strongly discourage civilians from engaging with infinity recreationally.
She closed the file. Then, as a precaution, she added a new rule to the Bureau's policy handbook.
Do not think too hard about infinity. It might just think about you back. And when that happens, no, it is not covered by homeowners insurance.